Agatha Raisin and the Persistently Pleasant Neighbour. A village drowning in kindness, a newcomer who knows far too much, and a death that turns goodwill into a deadly weapon. This is a mystery where nothing sweet is safe. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you listening from tonight? And subscribe so you never miss upcoming mysteries. I refuse to be paraded like a prize hen, Agatha snapped, though Doris Simpson was already marching her toward the W.I. Hall with the grim cheerfulness of a woman who believed friendliness cured all ills. Doris did not slow. She rarely did. It's only polite to welcome your new neighbour, Doris insisted, and she's lovely, absolutely lovely. That, Agatha thought darkly, was precisely the problem. Anyone Doris described as lovely usually meant trouble. Still, here she was, briskly escorted along the lane like a misbehaving child. Hodge had attempted to cling to her skirt earlier, sensing emotional turbulence, but she had deposited him firmly inside before Doris dragged her away. The trestle tables sagged under sausage rolls, buns, and that awful quiche Doris insisted on making for every village event. At least the chatter drowned out the faint humiliation prickling Agatha's neck. "Everyone," Doris announced with theatrical delight, "do meet Belinda Pym, who has moved into Lilac Cottage next to Mrs. Raisin." Agatha froze. A petite woman with a glossy caramel bob sprang forward as if spring-loaded. Her smile was so bright it ought to have been wired to the mains. "Oh, Mrs. Raisin," Belinda breathed. "What an honour! You're the Agatha Raisin. I've heard such wonderful things about your London career." Agatha's eyes narrowed. "Have you indeed?" She had offered Belinda one curt hello the previous afternoon at the garden fence, and nothing remotely resembling her life story. "Oh yes," Belinda continued, patting her arm as though soothing an overwrought toddler. "Your PR triumphs, your glamorous life. People still talk about your energy bar scandal article in the Times. So fearless." "I did that for a client," Agatha muttered, stiffening under the unwelcome patting, "and I never used the word fearless." Belinda's laugh tinkled. "But it's so you." Agatha was fairly certain she would need a gin by the end of the evening. Mrs. Blocksby floated over with her usual soft grace. "Welcome, Mrs. Pym. We hope you'll be very happy in Carsley. How are you finding Lilac Cottage?" "Oh, delightful," Belinda declared. "I've already met most of the neighbours. Everyone is just so interesting." Agatha blinked. "Already?" Belinda nodded eagerly. "I popped round with welcome muffins yesterday and learned the most fascinating stories." She dropped her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "And I sorted out that drainage problem at Mrs. Culver's. Terrible oversight by the previous tenant." Agatha bristled. "Who, apart from herself, went meddling round the village by day 2. Doris clapped loudly. "Everyone gather. Belinda's brought something special." Belinda presented muffins and an elaborate cake, each decorated with meticulous care. Agatha noted the over-the-top presentation, her suspicion quietly growing. Agatha winced. Subtlety had clearly died in that kitchen. Bill Wong's mother beamed approval. Mrs. Blocksby murmured something kindly about the craftsmanship. But Marjorie Keene, Carsley's sharpest tongue sharpened daily on village gossip, inspected the cake as if it had personally offended her. "Well," Marjorie announced, loud enough to halt all background chatter, "some people don't know when to stop pushing themselves forward. All that fuss. And for a stranger, too." Belinda gave a strangled little laugh. "Oh, this. Just a small gesture." Marjorie sniffed. "Village ways matter. New arrivals ought to settle quietly, not perform like they're on the wireless." Agatha winced again. She hated public embarrassment, unless she was the one orchestrating it. Watching Belinda's smile tremble ever so slightly, she felt grudging interest. People rarely cracked so early. Still, Agatha understood humiliation when she saw it. "It's just a cake, Marjorie," she said lightly, though she privately agreed the thing was monstrous. "And too much cake has never killed anyone in Carsley." "So far," Marjorie shot back. Belinda refilled Marjorie's tea with a speed and precision that suggested she needed the task done before she hurled the pot at someone. Her hands were steady, but the muscles in her wrists tightened. Agatha observed keenly. Too eager, too accommodating, too aware of who was who. Belinda had catalogued the village in record time. "Mrs. Keene," Belinda said, smiling politely, "I do hope we'll be good neighbours. I've heard such lovely stories about your roses." Marjorie narrowed her eyes. "From whom?" Oh, just things one hears, Agatha noted that little slip. How did Belinda already know Marjorie had a passion for roses and a notorious grudge against the vicar's wife and a long-standing quarrel with Trevor Lucas over guttering? Belinda somehow knew everything, tiny personal details folded into deceptively warm conversation. That was no accident. That was the sort of information someone gathered with purpose. Agatha disliked being outdone in that department. Belinda drifted from guest to guest, offering slices of the too enthusiastic cake, asking after children, husbands, pets. She remembered names she had heard only once. She complimented Mrs. Mason on her knitting pattern and Doris on her quiche, a foolish lie. Everyone basked in the attention except Agatha, who stiffened each time Belinda came within patting distance. Roy, if he had been there, would have accused Belinda of networking like an overexcited intern. Charles would have drawled something cutting about weaponized kindness. Agatha simply filed it all away. Mrs. Blocksby touched her elbow gently. She does seem very eager. She's suffocating, Agatha muttered. She's collected this entire village like stamps. You may be right, Mrs. Blocksby said, thoughtful, but perhaps she's simply lonely. Agatha disliked that idea. It made Belinda too similar to herself. Across the hall, Belinda leaned in to chat with Marjorie again. Oddly, Belinda's pleasant expression didn't soften. It hardened. Her smile remained perfect, but her eyes chilled with something uncomfortably controlled. Agatha looked closer. Yes, something wasn't right. The WI meeting continued with its usual blend of fussing, mild bickering, and Doris reading notices in a tone suggesting she was performing for the BBC. People dutifully clapped for Belinda's dreadful cake. Agatha avoided second helpings. She also avoided Belinda, who seemed determined to bond with everyone who exhaled near her. As chairs scraped and people gathered coats, Agatha excused herself under the pretext of helping tidy. Really, she wanted to observe undisturbed. Belinda stacked plates with brisk efficiency, humming softly. Her movements were neat and thoughtful, almost too controlled, as though she were performing tidiness rather than achieving it. Marjorie swept past, ignoring her completely. Belinda didn't call after her. She simply watched. And that was when Agatha saw it, the small, pleasant, utterly icy look Belinda cast at Marjorie's retreating figure, a look that did not match the sunshine smile at all. Agatha shivered. Doris would call it imagination. Mrs. Blocksby would call it intuition. Agatha called it a clue. As Belinda turned back to the plates, her cheerful mask snapped neatly into place again. "Mrs. Raisin," she chirped, "do take some cake home. I wrapped extra for Hodge. He's adorable." "He doesn't eat cake," Agatha said sharply, though Hodge had been known to gnaw pastries when unobserved. Belinda's smile widened. "Oh, I'm sure he'll learn." Agatha had no intention of letting anyone train her cat. She collected her coat, muttered good night, and stepped outside into the cooling air. The lane was quiet, the windows of the hall glowing like lanterns behind her. She felt oddly unsettled, as though she had stepped into some village drama she hadn't yet understood. From inside, she heard Doris call, "Such a lovely woman." Agatha wasn't convinced. At home, Hodge greeted her with the faintly offended dignity of a cat abandoned for 2 hours. Agatha scooped him up despite the protest and stroked his warm fur. "Well, Hodge," she said, switching on the kettle, "our new neighbour is either unbearably sweet or unbearably calculating, and I don't trust either." Hodge flicked his tail, unimpressed. The kettle sighed. Somewhere behind them, a slice of unwelcome cake sat on the counter, far too pink for comfort. Agatha lit a single small lamp, the room softening around her. "We'll keep an eye on her," she murmured. Hodge stretched, utterly content, as though he already knew she would. The next morning, Agatha shouted, flinging open the airing cupboard, "Hodge, if you've crawled behind the towels again, I swear—" No cat, only the faint smell of lavender detergent and her rising irritation. She marched through the cottage, calling his name with increasing outrage. "Hodge, you disloyal beast, come out this instant!" It was typical of him to vanish precisely when she needed moral support. Her morning had already begun with a burnt piece of toast and a snag in her tights. She needed her cat, not empty rooms mocking her. She checked under the sofa, behind the curtains, inside the wardrobe, and even in the bath. Nothing. A small, traitorous fear crept in. Hodge was adventurous, but he always returned for breakfast. She grabbed her coat and stomped outside. Agatha hurried down the lane, muttering under her breath. Hodge was discovered almost immediately, curled like an emperor on Belinda Pym's chintz sofa, being hand-fed some suspiciously expensive cat food from a porcelain dish. Belinda herself hovered over him, cooing, "There's my poor lonely boy. Isn't he a darling?" "He's my darling," Agatha snapped, barging into the sitting room. "Hodge, you traitor!" Hodge glanced up, blinked in serene indifference, and continued eating. Belinda beamed as though she had rescued a starving orphan. "Oh, Mrs. Raisin, he was scratching at my door ever so desperately. I simply couldn't leave him outside, and he looked famished. Honestly, I don't know how you keep up with him." "I keep up with him perfectly well," Agatha said, while glaring at the evidence to the contrary. Belinda fluttered. "I did tidy your path for you. It was terribly slippery with those leaves. And I trimmed your roses. They were crying out for attention. I rearranged the milk bottles too. One had fallen over." Agatha's jaw stiffened. "I prefer my chaos untouched." Belinda laughed softly. "Oh, you're funny." Agatha did not feel funny. She scooped Hodge into her arms, earning a resentful meow, and marched home. Behind her, Belinda called a syrupy goodbye. Agatha muttered one of her choicer London expressions, then immediately corrected herself, because Mrs. Bloxby sometimes insisted language shaped moral character. Carsley felt irritatingly energetic under the pale stretch of winter sun. Perfectly pleasant, perfectly ordinary, except every resident seemed to be discussing Belinda Pym. At the village shop, Agatha overheard Mrs. Mason telling the butcher, "She's an angel, that one. Delivered a casserole before I'd even said good morning." "She pruned my apple tree," another woman boasted. "She reorganized my pantry," Doris chimed in. "I didn't even ask." Agatha grimaced. "That sounds like a violation." "Oh no," Doris said cheerfully. "She's just very helpful." "Too helpful," Agatha muttered. "Almost professionally helpful." But Doris, immersed in selecting biscuits for the WI raffle, missed the comment. Agatha purchased her newspaper and noticed Trevor Lucas glowering near the post office. His boots were muddy, his expression thunderous. Trevor had the unfortunate air of a man perpetually offended by life. Today, he looked even more sour. She debated asking him what his problem was, but decided against it. Agatha Raisin had enough problems without collecting Trevor's. As she returned to her cottage, she heard the distinctive stomp of Marjorie Keene. Marjorie marched up to her gate, face blotched with indignation. "There you are," Marjorie barked. "You must speak to that woman immediately." Agatha sighed. "Which woman? I've offended at least 3 today." "Your neighbour, that Belinda creature." Marjorie thrust a small wicker basket into Agatha's hands. Inside were lavender soap, a magazine titled Comfort and Cheer, and a jar labelled Cheer Up Chutney. A handwritten note perched on top. Agatha read aloud. "Thinking of you in these difficult times. You are stronger than you know." Marjorie's voice rose dangerously. "Difficult times? What difficult times? I'm perfectly capable. I don't appreciate being portrayed as some fragile relic." "Perhaps she meant to humiliate me," Marjorie snapped. "And this isn't the first parcel. 2 already, since yesterday. Anonymous, but of course it's her, always lurking with her casseroles and pity." Agatha studied the note again. The handwriting curled theatrically, each loop lovingly exaggerated. Something tugged at her memory. She had seen that handwriting recently. Belinda's WI sign-up sheets. Marjorie jabbed a finger toward Lilac Cottage. "You tell her to stop, or I will. Loudly." Agatha cleared her throat. "Have you spoken to Bill Wong?" "I don't need the police to stop soap parcels." Marjorie snatched the basket back. "But mark my words, Mrs. Raisin, kindness can be a weapon." That, Agatha thought, sounded uncomfortably true. Marjorie stalked off, nearly colliding with Trevor Lucas, who muttered, "Watch where you're going." Marjorie responded with a colourful suggestion that made Agatha raise her eyebrows. "Charming," Trevor grumbled as he passed Agatha. "Some people think insulting tradesmen is a hobby." "Trouble with Marjorie again?" Agatha asked casually. Trevor scowled. "She refused to pay for the guttering job. Said I botched it. I didn't. Then she told half the village lies about me. Waste of breath, that one." He stomped away, kicking a stone into the road. Agatha watched him go, filing every word for later. In Carsley, anger and embarrassment lingered longer than rainwater in a pothole. Back in her kitchen, Hodge jumped onto the counter and demanded food with a pointed stare. Agatha poured some biscuits into a bowl. Hodge stared, unimpressed, clearly missing Belinda's superior menu. Agatha wagged a finger at him. "Don't get ideas, you spoiled creature." Once fed, Hodge sprawled near the radiator with regal disdain. Agatha made herself tea and stared at the cream notepaper Marjorie had thrust into her hands earlier. She fished another sample from her handbag, the WI sheet Belinda had circulated last night. The looping script was very similar. Too similar. Agatha frowned. Belinda was either thoughtlessly overhelpful or something else entirely. Later in the afternoon, she slipped over to the vicarage, using the excuse of returning a borrowed gardening book. Mrs. Bloxby opened the door, warm and serene as always. "Agatha, dear, you look troubled. Come in." Agatha held up the note. "Have you seen handwriting like this?" Mrs. Bloxby inspected it. "It's very expressive." "That's one word," Agatha muttered. "Belinda writes like this." Mrs. Bloxby nodded thoughtfully. "I imagine she means well." "Meaning well is the first step toward causing trouble," Agatha declared. "Ask any politician." Mrs. Bloxby smiled. "Marjorie isn't an easy woman to help." "She doesn't want soap," Agatha snapped. "She wants respect." "Well," Mrs. Bloxby said gently, "perhaps Belinda misjudged her." Agatha sniffed. "Belinda misjudges everyone, except cats, apparently." Mrs. Bloxby poured tea. "People sometimes give too much when they fear they're not wanted." Agatha bristled. "I'm not analysing Belinda's insecurities. I'm dealing with the fact she's mobilised Carsley like a personal project." Before Mrs. Bloxby could reply, a heavy thump sounded at the vicarage gate. Marjorie again, storming toward Lilac Cottage with the emotional subtlety of a marching band. "Oh dear," Mrs. Bloxby murmured. "Come on," Agatha said, grabbing her coat. "If she starts a row, I want front row seating." They watched from the garden path as Marjorie reached Belinda's door. Belinda opened it with her sunny smile, which dimmed instantly when Marjorie shoved the basket at her. "I don't need your pity," Marjorie shouted, "or your scented nonsense." I'm sorry you felt that way," Belinda said, voice too bright. "I only wanted—" "You wanted attention," Marjorie barked. "Well, here it is." The argument escalated quickly. Belinda's tone grew sugary and strained. Marjorie's voice carried across the lane like artillery fire. Agatha's eyebrows rose higher with each exchange. Eventually, Marjorie stormed off, slamming Belinda's garden gate so hard the latch rattled. Belinda closed her door with painful slowness, head bowed. Mrs. Bloxby sighed. "Poor woman." "Which one?" Agatha asked. Mrs. Bloxby hesitated. "Both, I think." Agatha wasn't so sure. Something about Belinda's expression, the way her smile tightened, the flicker of calculation behind her eyes, felt wrong, too controlled, too knowing. Evening settled with Carsley's usual quiet charm, lamps flickering in cottage windows. Agatha prepared a simple supper, though Hodge protested the lack of luxury. She ignored him and sat with her notebook, jotting a few observations. Belinda collects personal details. Belinda distributes anonymous gifts. Belinda provokes extreme reactions. Belinda knows too much. The final entry. Marjorie furious. Possible grudge on both sides. She had just closed the notebook when raised voices sounded through the thin party wall. Lilac Cottage echoed with Belinda's brittle cheerfulness and Marjorie's familiar bark. Agatha held her breath, listening. The words were muffled but unmistakably heated. Then, a sharp, resounding slam. Silence followed, thick and complete. Hodge lifted his head, ears flicking. Agatha looked toward the wall. "Something's brewing, Hodge?" Hodge yawned, unimpressed, and curled tighter. The kettle sighed in the background as if agreeing with her. "Don't you dare pretend you're busy," Marjorie snapped the moment Agatha opened her door. "I'm hosting a good neighbour coffee morning and you're coming." Agatha blinked. "A what?" "A performative act of Christian goodwill." Marjorie's lip curled. "Apparently I must set an example." "Who said that?" "The vicar," Marjorie huffed. "Mrs. Bloxby added her gentle nonsense, and Doris said she'd bring biscuits, which means they'll be inedible." She thrust a plate of limp-looking bourbons at Agatha. "Here, bring something presentable." Agatha felt instantly trapped. Coffee mornings were bad enough. Coffee mornings hosted by Marjorie promised ritual suffering. Still, curiosity tugged at her. The feud between Marjorie and Belinda simmered like a badly tended stew, and Agatha had no intention of missing the next ladleful. "I'll come," she sighed, "but only because gossip thrives in cramped rooms." Marjorie snorted. "Gossip is the only reason to have neighbours." Half an hour later, Agatha entered Marjorie's chilly sitting room, a space so rigidly organised that the furniture seemed afraid to breathe. Stiff-backed chairs circled a coffee table crowded with cheap biscuits and mismatched teacups. The heating wheezed, providing little warmth. Several village women were already squeezed in, perched like hens in a coop. Agatha felt instantly overdressed and underamused. "Mrs. Raisin, do sit," murmured Pauline Keene, Marjorie's sister-in-law, a woman so unremarkable she could disappear while standing in front of you. She gestured to a chair with apologetic politeness, as if apologising for existing. Agatha sat, adjusting her skirt with unnecessary dignity. "I didn't expect so many people," Pauline whispered. Marjorie insisted the invitation be circulated. Her eyes flicked nervously toward the kitchen. She wanted a generous audience. "Of course she did," Agatha muttered. The air buzzed with polite talk. Cups rattled. Someone praised the biscuits with the hollow enthusiasm of a hostage. Agatha scanned the room, noting the nudges exchanged whenever Marjorie exhaled. Tension circled the room like a wasp trapped indoors. Then Belinda arrived. She burst through the doorway carrying 3 neatly wrapped jars and a glossy walnut-topped cheese savoury displayed on a floral plate. She radiated sunshine so aggressively it hurt. "Good morning, everyone," Belinda chirped. "I brought a little something to share. I do hope you'll enjoy it." Marjorie's smile went brittle. "Oh, how kind. Shop-bought would have been fine." Belinda laughed as if the insult were a compliment. "Nonsense. Homemade always tastes better." "Not from you, it doesn't," Agatha thought, watching Belinda place her offerings like trophies. The jars gleamed with cheerfully printed labels. "Cheer up chutney." The cheese savoury sparkled under its layer of walnuts. Agatha observed the steel beneath Belinda's sweetness. Belinda's movements were tidy, precise, too precise. Her voice smoothed over barbs with unsettling efficiency. The other guests watched like spectators at a tennis match, waiting to see who would score the next point. Marjorie poured tea with exaggerated delicacy. A good hostess knows her guests' preferences. Belinda smiled. A good neighbour brings comfort where she can. "That's so," Marjorie muttered. Agatha almost applauded. Doris fluttered forward to sample the chutney. "My word, that's lively." "Too lively," murmured Mrs. Mason, wincing. Agatha took a small spoonful out of duty. The chutney was indeed potent, spiced, tangy, and oddly bitter at the edges. Not bad exactly, but memorable. She tucked the observation away. Guests politely nibbled the walnut-topped cheese savoury. Belinda praised everyone's outfits. Marjorie made snide remarks about people who try too hard. Hens in a yard would have behaved with more decorum. Midway through the morning, Marjorie accepted a plate from Pauline, cheese savoury, biscuits, and a dollop of chutney. She took a bite of the savoury, paused, then scooped up a spoonful of chutney. Seconds later, her expression changed. She pressed a hand to her throat. "Good heavens," she croaked. What is—" Her face greyed. She staggered, knocking a teacup into Mrs. Mason's lap. Gasps rose. Chairs scraped violently. Marjorie tried to speak, but only managed a strangled, "Bitter, so bitter." Then she collapsed. Doris screamed. Someone dropped a plate. Pauline froze, her hand covering her mouth. Belinda stood rooted, jar still in her hand. "Call an ambulance," Agatha barked, leaping toward Marjorie. Doris fumbled with the landline, dialing with shaking fingers. It's Mrs. Keene. She's just come quickly." Pauline knelt beside Marjorie, whispering her name uselessly. Agatha felt for a pulse there, but faint. The room whirled with panic. Belinda whispered, "What's happening? She only had a little chutney." "Quiet," Agatha said sharply. Minutes later, Bill Wong arrived, calm and focused amid the chaos. He gently moved everyone back. "Let the paramedics through, please." The ambulance crew lifted Marjorie onto a stretcher. Her breathing was shallow, her skin ashen. Pauline clung to her hand with trembling fingers. As the stretcher was carried out, Marjorie whispered something hoarse and broken. Agatha leaned closer, catching only fragments. Poisonous, kindness. Then she was gone into the ambulance. The sitting room fell silent except for the faint ticking of Marjorie's mantel clock. Belinda dabbed her eyes. "I didn't mean—" "Oh, Bill, you have to believe—" We'll speak later, Bill said gently. For now, everyone should go home. Try to stay calm. Calm? Mrs. Mason snapped. A woman just collapsed at a coffee morning. Then avoid the chutney, muttered Trevor Lucas from the doorway, where he'd somehow appeared. Never trusted homemade goods. Agatha shot him a sharp look. What are you doing here? Trevor shrugged. Came to fix a light fitting. Was supposed to last week, but she yelled at me. He glanced pointedly at Marjorie's absence. Probably won't be paying me now either. Bill raised an eyebrow. We'll follow up with you. Trevor scowled. Knew you'd say that. Once the ambulance left, the room vibrated with speculation. Some comforted Pauline. Others cornered Belinda with polite caution, as if she were a live wire. Agatha slipped out, needing space and clarity. She crossed the quiet lane and entered her cottage, where Hodge immediately greeted her with exaggerated hunger. You always pick your moments, she muttered, scooping him up. She washed her hands, distracted, and opened a small jar of leftover chutney she'd taken from Marjorie's, purely out of habit and curiosity. A smear clung to her finger. Hodge sniffed it, licked it once, then recoiled dramatically before stalking off as though personally insulted. Well, that's telling, Agatha murmured. You've eaten worse. She stared at the chutney jar, mind buzzing. Only Belinda's food was new today. The chutney tasted odd, stronger than expected, unbalanced, bitter at the edges, and several guests had mentioned it tasted unusually potent. But was that reason enough to suspect ill intent? Belinda, with her relentless kindness, her casseroles, her floral handwriting, perhaps she had simply misjudged her recipe. A knock sounded. Bill stood at her door, expression grave but gentle. News? Agatha asked. They're running tests at the hospital, he said quietly. It doesn't look good. She didn't make it, Bill said. I'm sorry. Poison? We don't know yet. Agatha folded her arms tightly. But you suspect it. Bill didn't deny it. Marjorie said something to you, didn't she? Agatha hesitated. Only that bitterness. Something about poisonous kindness. Bill nodded. We'll need statements from everyone, and I don't like the look of this at all. Agatha watched him disappear down the lane, shoulders tight with concern. Inside, the kettle clicked off. Hodge hopped onto the table, curling into a loaf, still offended by the chutney incident. Agatha stroked his warm head. Well, darling, something is very wrong in Castley. Hodge flicked his tail. And I intend to find out what, she murmured. The kettle sighed again, as if agreeing. Poison? Agatha repeated, instantly forgetting the burned toast sulking in her kitchen. She nearly dropped the receiver. Bill, don't play games. Did you say poison? A pause, then Bill's steady voice. Digitalis, confirmed in the post-mortem. Agatha let out a low whistle. So Marjorie wasn't being dramatic for once. That's not funny, Bill said, though she heard the familiar undertone of exasperated fondness. Look, I know you'll poke your nose in anyway, so you may as well be useful. I can allow a supervised look at the parlour. Supervised, Agatha, meaning no touching, no moving, and no theories shouted at colleagues. I never shout, Agatha protested. You always shout. Agatha hung up before he could elaborate. She dashed on lipstick, coaxed Hodge off her favourite chair, and hurried out, thrilled in spite of herself. Murder always enlivened the week. Bill waited outside Marjorie's cottage, looking weary but resigned. Behave, he said as greeting. I always behave. You absolutely do not. They stepped inside. The parlour was exactly as it had been during the coffee morning, except for the cold stillness that now clung to it. Half-empty cups lined the table. A smear of the now infamous chutney glistened on a plate. Someone's abandoned knitting drooped over the armchair. The cheer-up chutney jar stood innocently on the sideboard, label slightly askew as if trying too hard to appear harmless. Oh, this is marvellous, Agatha breathed. Well, awful, obviously, but marvellous in the investigative sense. Bill shot her a warning look. Be serious. I am perfectly serious, she said, though her pulse danced. He led her through the initial findings. Trace digitalis was found in her bloodstream. The concentration suggests ingestion within the hour, meaning during the coffee morning. So it was in the food, Agatha said, not slipped into a cup later. That's what it looks like, Bill admitted. Agatha eyed the remains on the table. Belinda brought the chutney and the cheese savoury. She did, but guests were helping themselves. Anyone could have tampered with them. Agatha scoffed. They were all packed together like sad sardines on those chairs. Nobody sneaked anywhere. Bill rubbed his forehead. "Agatha, you can't assume." "I don't assume," she said sharply. "I observe." Bill sighed. "Fine. Observe quietly." She prowled the parlour with the intensity of a cat hunting socks. The faint smell of spices lingered. The cups gave nothing away. The plates told a familiar story of mediocre hospitality. But the chutney jar, bright, cheerful, and ever so slightly crooked, drew her like a magnet. "Label's loose," she said, meaning someone handled it more than once. "Or it wasn't glued properly," Bill countered. "Bill, I'm trying to help." "I know," he said with long-suffering patience. They left Marjorie's cottage and walked next door to Lilac Cottage. Belinda opened the door immediately, as though she had been waiting behind it, listening for footsteps. Her eyes were red, her face drawn. "Oh, Bill," she whispered, "I heard you were questioning everyone." "I'm cooperating fully, of course. I would never harm anyone." Her gaze flicked nervously to Agatha. "You know that, don't you?" Agatha gave a non-committal grunt. She was not prepared to offer comfort to someone who reorganized other people's milk bottles. Belinda ushered them into her kitchen, a bright, annoyingly pretty space with floral curtains and spotless counters. Along one wall sat a regiment of jars, all labelled in that now familiar looping script. Cheer-up chutney, hearthside relish, festive pickle. The collection looked like a shrine to forced optimism. "My goodness," Agatha muttered. "A whole army of morale boosters." Belinda attempted a shaky smile. "I like to be prepared. People appreciate gifts." "Not all people," Agatha said pointedly. Bill lifted one jar. "How many did you make?" 12, Belinda said promptly. "Well, 13, though I may have miscounted. I gave one to Mrs. Culver, I think, or perhaps I meant to." She blinked rapidly. "I've been so scattered." Agatha frowned. 13, but only 11 on the shelf." Belinda wrung her hands. "I must have given another away. Truly, I didn't poison anyone. I just wanted people to like me." "Poison tends to have the opposite effect," Agatha said. Bill shot her a glare. Belinda's eyes filled. "I try so hard. I always have. People misunderstand." Agatha, who disliked tears on principle, looked around to escape the sentiment. Her gaze landed on Belinda's garden through the window, neatly kept beds, herbs flourishing, and several proud foxglove stalks rising above the greenery. Digitalis, of course. Belinda followed her gaze. "Aren't they pretty? I don't know much about gardening, really. I just plant whatever looks cheerful." Agatha raised an eyebrow. "And foxgloves seemed cheerful." Belinda faltered. "They came with the cottage." Bill asked a few more questions, mostly procedural. Belinda answered each with the tremulous eagerness of a schoolgirl desperate for top marks. When they finally left, Agatha exhaled heavily. "She's lying," Agatha declared. "You don't know that," Bill said. "She lied about the foxgloves, and the jars, and possibly her entire life story." Bill shook his head. "You can't jump to conclusions this early." "I don't jump," Agatha snapped. "I stride purposefully." He laughed despite himself. "We'll interview Trevor Lucas next. Half the village heard him arguing with Marjorie about unpaid bills. He's furious, and not exactly subtle." "Trevor couldn't poison a sandwich without poisoning himself," Agatha said, "but he's a good red herring." Bill stopped walking. "A what?" "Nothing," Agatha said quickly. "Never mind," he groaned. "Agatha, no plotting. No promises." They approached her cottage. Agatha glanced back toward Marjorie's house. The lace curtains in the parlour window fluttered slightly. "That's odd," she murmured. "Did Bill's officers open a window?" "No," Bill said. "Why?" "Because someone just moved behind the curtains." They both stared. The curtains stilled. The house looked perfectly empty. Bill frowned. "The property is sealed. Nobody should be inside." "Except someone is watching the boundary," Agatha said, "between me and Belinda." Bill gave her a cautious look. "Don't get ideas." "I already have several." "You always do." He gave her a tired half-smile, then headed down the lane to continue his work. Inside, Agatha locked her door, unsettled but exhilarated. Hodge emerged from under the table, stretching extravagantly before nudging her shin with imperious affection. She scooped him up. "Someone's watching, darling, and I intend to find out who." Hodge blinked, unimpressed. Agatha set him down and filled the kettle. The gentle hum filled the kitchen, grounding her. Mystery or not, tea still ruled Castley. As the kettle clicked off, she cast one last glance at the window. The lace curtain opposite swayed again, only slightly, but enough. "Something's very wrong here," she murmured. Hodge flicked his tail and curled into a warm loaf, the picture of domestic indifference as the mystery deepened. "Agatha, darling, I came the moment I heard the village had produced its very own murder." Roy Silver swept into Agatha's cottage in a cloud of cologne strong enough to stun wildlife. He flung his scarf across her sofa, nearly decapitating Hodge, who hissed with deep personal offence. "Must you always arrive like a musical number?" Agatha snapped, scooping Hodge protectively into her lap. Roy ignored her. "This is extraordinary. Murder in a sweet little Cotswold village. Why haven't you given me the exclusive?" "There is no exclusive," Agatha muttered. "Just a dead woman and a neighbour who bakes too aggressively." "That's practically a headline." Roy perched on the arm of her chair. "And speaking of headlines," he flourished a folded newspaper clipping from his designer bag. "Your new neighbour has a past." Agatha stiffened. "Belinda?" Roy wiggled his eyebrows with theatrical relish. "Belinda Pym, formerly Belinda Parks, known, briefly but gloriously, as the Smiling Angel." Hodge sneezed disdainfully. Agatha shared the sentiment. "What sort of idiot nickname is that?" Roy leaned in. "The tabloid sort. She worked in a care home. A patient died under suspicious circumstances. Nothing proven, of course, but the papers adored her. Sweet, saintly girl turned sinister." Agatha snatched the clipping. A young Belinda stared up from the grainy photo, smiling that same bright, uncomfortably serene smile. "What happened?" "Oh, the usual," Roy said airily. "Staff misconduct, improperly logged medication, accusations flying everywhere. But guess who reported the dodgy practices?" "Belinda." "Exactly. And guess who the press blamed?" "Belinda." Agatha narrowed her eyes. "Convenient," Roy preened. "I do deliver." They walked to the Red Lion for lunch, Roy insisting the occasion required a dramatic setting, Agatha needing chips. Inside, the pub was warm and comfortably busy, filled with the hum of lunchtime conversation. Roy pushed his chair close, lowering his voice dramatically. "Agatha, you see the pattern. Care home scandal, elderly patient. Now Marjorie Keane. This woman is a serial menace." "She might also be unlucky," Agatha said, "or incompetent, or overly kind." "Kindness doesn't kill people," Roy sniffed. Marjorie might disagree. Their plates arrived, Roy's salad elaborate and fussy, Agatha's chips comfortingly large and greasy. She glanced once more at the clipping. There, under Belinda's smiling photograph, was an image of an incident log written in Belinda's hand. Her stomach tightened. The handwriting, those flourished capitals, the looping R's, was painfully familiar. "Roy," she said slowly, "this is the same handwriting from the kindness notes." Roy choked dramatically on a cherry tomato. "You don't mean—" "Exactly what I mean." He dabbed his mouth. "This is getting delicious." After lunch, Agatha insisted they drive to Evesham. Roy sulked dramatically about leaving the pub's warm lighting. My cheekbones were thriving, but relented. Evesham's high street was lively in the bright afternoon. Buses hissing, shop bells jangling, the world determinedly ordinary, despite the dark trail Agatha felt she was following. They found the retired nurse, Mrs. Harker, because village circles, when prodded properly, produced information faster than any newspaper archive. The woman welcomed them with tea and a blunt manner that matched her sensible shoes. "Belinda Parks? Oh, yes, I remember her," Mrs. Harker said. "Sweet girl, too sweet, always smiling even when she should have been shouting." Agatha leaned forward. "You worked with her?" "Briefly. She cared too much, and she was too eager to please for her own good. Reported the wrong people, poor thing. Management buried her. Press crucified her. All nonsense, of course." "She wasn't responsible for the patient's death," Agatha pressed. "Not in the least. She raised concerns. They ignored her, then pinned the fallout on the easiest target." Mrs. Harker shook her head. "She tried to fix things by being helpful, but people don't trust helpfulness." Agatha felt something complicated twist inside her, a reluctant tug of sympathy mixed with suspicion. Roy unhelpfully whispered, "So she's traumatized and unstable. Terribly convenient." Agatha jabbed him in the ribs. Back in Carsley, the gossip had already spread. By the time Agatha and Roy reached the village green, at least 4 villagers were mid-discussion, pretending not to watch them. Belinda materialized beside the hedge, holding a tray of freshly baked buns, overcompensation baked into soft dough. "Oh, Mrs. Raisin, Mr. Silver," she said, cheeks pink. "I made these to apologize for everything. People misunderstand. I only wanted to help." Roy took a bun immediately. "Darling, I adore an apology baked in sugar." Agatha folded her arms. "We heard about your past." Belinda went pale. "My past?" "The care home," Agatha said. "The press." Belinda's fingers twitched. "That was years ago. I moved here to begin again. I thought people might appreciate kindness instead of twisting it." Agatha studied her carefully. Under the flustered protest was genuine fear, or a superb imitation of it. "Did Marjorie know about it?" she asked. Belinda shook her head quickly. "No, I never told anyone. Why would I? It only makes people think the worst." "Sometimes," Agatha said, "the worst is already in their heads." Roy patted Belinda's hand. "Ignore Agatha. She distrusts anyone who remembers birthdays." Agatha glared. Roy smiled like an especially handsome viper. Belinda swallowed. "I only want people to feel cared for." Her hands trembled. "Is that so terrible?" Agatha hesitated. She hated seeing people tremble, unless they deserved it. She wasn't sure where Belinda fell yet. Belinda thrust the tray toward them again. "Please, take another bun." "No," Agatha said abruptly. "We've had enough kindness for one day." Belinda flinched. "Right, of course." She turned away, shoulders drooping. Roy sighed theatrically. "You could have softened it, darling. She's hiding something. She's hiding trauma and baking." Roy licked icing from his fingers. "What if she really was scapegoated twice? Once by the care home, now by this village?" Agatha didn't answer. The question nagged. Evening settled softly over Carsley. The village exhaled into its cozy twilight, cottages glowing, the Red Lion clattering with regulars, the scent of someone's shepherd's pie drifting through the air. Agatha walked Roy to his car. "Don't stir anything while I'm thinking," she warned. Roy kissed the air near her cheek. "Darling, stirring is how I breathe." He vanished in a glamour of exhaust and perfume. Agatha wandered to the vicarage to return Mrs. Bloxby's casserole dish, an excuse, but a reasonable one. Mrs. Bloxby answered with her warm, steady smile. "Agatha, you've been busy." "Roy found something," Agatha said. She summarized the care home scandal, the clipping, the looping handwriting. Mrs. Bloxby listened without interruption. When Agatha finished, she said quietly, "It is easy in a village to choose the most convenient villain." "You think Belinda's innocent?" "I think she is frightened, and when people are frightened, they behave poorly. But so do their neighbours." Agatha huffed. "Are you suggesting we're all scapegoating her?" Mrs. Bloxby's eyes softened. "Agatha, ask yourself, whom does the village want to blame? A newcomer with a tabloid past, or someone they've known for years?" Agatha did not like the question. It scratched uncomfortably near her pride. She thanked Mrs. Bloxby stiffly and left. Back home, Hodge greeted her by stretching luxuriously across the rug, claws kneading with contentment. Agatha lifted him, burying her face in his warm fur. "Well, darling," she murmured, "everyone here loves a villain. The trick is figuring out whether they've picked the right one." Hodge purred, indifferent but comforting. Agatha set him down as the kettle hissed softly behind her. Mrs. Bloxby's question lingered like steam in the small warm kitchen. Whom does Carsley want to blame, and why? "Absolutely not," Agatha declared, staring into her fridge as though it had personally betrayed her. "I refuse to serve Charles Fraith wilted lettuce and a fish finger." Hodge, crouched on the counter where he had no right to be, flicked an ear in judgment. Agatha glared at him. "This is your fault. If I didn't spend half my income on your wretched gourmet packets, I'd have room for actual food." The phone rang. She snatched it up. "Agatha? Charles here. Thought I'd pop down this evening. You'll feed me, won't you?" "No," Agatha said automatically. "Splendid. I'll bring wine," Charles replied, ignoring her answer entirely. "Good wine. None of that supermarket swill." The line went dead. Agatha slammed the handset down. He invited himself. Again. She eyed Hodge. And he expects feeding. Of course he does, because apparently I run a restaurant for aristocrats and cats. Her annoyance simmered until a knock sounded. She yanked open the door. Belinda Pym stood on the steps, smiling like a woman in a detergent advert. "Mrs. Raisin, I heard Charles was visiting. I thought I might help." Without waiting for permission, Belinda swept inside, carrying a basket that looked like it could support a family of 6. She unloaded its contents onto Agatha's table. Quiche, salad, 2 puddings, chutneys, a cheese board, warm bread, and a jug of homemade dressing. Agatha stared. "Belinda, I didn't ask for—" "Oh, it's nothing," Belinda breathed. "We must support each other." Agatha felt simultaneously invaded and relieved. "Well, thank you." The cottage glowed under lamplight, warm and welcoming despite the intrusion. Hodge prowled in offended circles, sniffing everything with deep suspicion. Charles arrived moments later, breezing in with an expensive bottle and an amused lift of his eyebrow. "Good Lord, Agatha, when did you become competent?" "I didn't," she snapped. "Belinda brought this mountain." Belinda flushed happily. "I do adore feeding people. It's comforting." Charles's interest sharpened, subtle, hidden beneath lazy charm. He took her hand. "How kind of you. Castly as lucky." Belinda fluttered, overwhelmed. Agatha's irritation spiked. They sat. Immediately, Belinda began fussing over their plates, piling food with excessive precision, adjusting cutlery angles, pressing napkins into place. She barely touched her own meal. "You're not eating," Charles observed. "Oh, I have a terribly small appetite," Belinda insisted. "I prefer to serve." Charles exchanged a look with Agatha, sharp, curious, edged with something more analytical than he usually showed. He watched Belinda closely. Conversation turned, as it inevitably would, to the investigation. Bill had rung earlier. "It wasn't in the chutney. It was applied to the food at the last minute. We'll know exactly where once forensics finish." Belinda's spoon clattered against her plate. She froze, smile stretched too thin. I wouldn't know anything about that." Agatha leaned forward. "It implies a last-minute application, someone painting the poison on." Belinda pushed her chair back abruptly. "Oh dear, I must check on my puddings." She disappeared into the kitchen, hands trembling. Charles watched her leave. "Interesting reaction." "Very," Agatha murmured. Belinda returned after a moment, cheerfulness forcibly reapplied, but her hands shook as she cut the pudding. "You must excuse me," she said breathlessly. "It's been such a frightful week." Charles leaned back, swirling wine. "You know, Belinda, the foxgloves in your garden are thriving." Belinda stiffened. "Oh, I wouldn't know. I'm hopeless with plants." "Curious," Charles said lightly. "Digitalis comes from foxgloves." Belinda's eyes widened. I had no idea." Agatha didn't believe that for a moment. Charles's gaze drifted to a pair of rubber kitchen gloves tucked beside Belinda's basket. "Did you bring those?" "Oh, yes," Belinda said. "I always carry them." Agatha lifted one. The gloves were scrubbed nearly raw, faintly stained with something brownish. Not chutney, something darker. Charles caught her eye. He had noticed too. Belinda hurriedly grabbed the gloves. "I should go clean up at home. I've taken up too much of your evening." "Stay," Agatha said too quickly. She wanted answers. Belinda shook her head. "I must go. Truly." She nearly fled the cottage. Charles sipped his wine thoughtfully. "For someone so kind, she watches your cottage window quite a lot." Agatha froze. What? "Every time I walk up your path," Charles said casually, "her curtain twitches. She's always watching." Agatha's stomach tightened. "Why?" "Because she's frightened," Charles said. "Or guilty, or both." He topped up his glass. "But she's not the only watcher." "What do you mean?" Charles gestured subtly toward Marjorie's darkened cottage. "That window has an audience too." Agatha shivered. "I saw that yesterday. Someone was behind the net curtains." Charles's tone softened. "Be careful, Agatha." "I'm always careful." "No," Charles said. "You absolutely aren't." She glared at him. He smirked. They ate in uneasy silence for a moment, the table crowded with Belinda's excessive generosity. Hodge prowled under Charles's chair, occasionally swatting a bread roll to register protest. Finally, Agatha exhaled. "She's hiding something." Charles nodded. "But not necessarily murder." Then what? Her past, her fear, her need to control everything. People can look sinister without being killers. Agatha hated when Charles was reasonable. Bill rang again. We rechecked the cheese savoury dish. Someone handled the topping area. Belinda's prints are inconsistent with last contact. Agatha blinked. But she swore she handled it. Exactly, which suggests she's lying, or she's telling the truth and someone wiped the jar. Wonderful, Agatha muttered. That clears nothing up. Bill had also said, Trevor Lucas is still a suspect. His argument with Marjorie was loud enough to cause a scene. Yes, Agatha said darkly, but Trevor couldn't poison a slice of toast without poisoning the toaster. Charles chuckled. After the call, the cottage grew quiet. Hodge hopped onto the back of Agatha's chair, glaring at Charles as though defending territory. Agatha stroked his head, more for her comfort than his. Charles pushed aside his empty plate. What's your feeling? That Belinda knows more than she's telling. Agatha tapped her notebook. But someone else keeps watching her, and me, which makes no sense unless Belinda isn't the only one terrified. Agatha's eyes narrowed. Or guilty. Charles rose, placed a gentle kiss on her forehead, infuriatingly casual, and headed for the door. Keep your lights on, and keep that cat from selling state secrets. Hodge is loyal, Agatha snapped. Unlike you. Charles laughed his way out. Agatha gathered the dishes with irritation prickling under her skin. Belinda's food, her nerves, her over-tidy gloves, none of it fit comfortably. She crossed to the window. Lilac Cottage stood quiet, dark but watching. Next door, Marjorie's cottage sat still, the net curtains unmoving, for now. Who's watching whom? She murmured. She turned off the lamp. Hodge stretched, luxuriously indifferent, before curling into her lap. The kettle sighed, readying water for her thoughts. Church, Agatha muttered, stabbing a hairpin into place. The things I endure for murder. Hodge, sprawled insolently across her coat, refused to move. Oh, get off, she snapped, shoving him aside. I'm going for observation, not salvation. She marched to St. Mary's, Charles strolling beside her with his maddening calm. You know, he said lightly, most people attend church to worship. Most people don't have suspects to study, Agatha retorted. Inside, the service trundled along predictably. Hymns were sung with rural enthusiasm and questionable pitch. Mrs. Bloxby's gentle homily soothed half the pews into benevolent drowsiness. Agatha barely heard a word. She spent the hour watching faces. Belinda sat near the front, smile too bright, hands clasped as if praying desperately. Leonard Keene, Marjorie's widowed brother, stood stiffly beside Pauline, a woman so beige and quiet that Agatha had genuinely forgotten she existed until the vicar announced condolences. Pauline accepted them with prim bows, her expression composed, tidy, forgettable. Forgettable, Agatha thought, can be very convenient. After the final hymn, the congregation spilled into the aisle for coffee. The chatter rose instantly. Sorrow, shock, baked goods. Agatha drifted toward the refreshments, Charles trailing like a bored cat. Leonard stood at the centre of a sympathetic knot, pale and bewildered. Pauline, in contrast, managed condolences with polished efficiency. I'm so sorry for your loss, villagers murmured. Yes, thank you, Pauline said smoothly, passing biscuits. We're bearing up. Agatha watched her carefully. Pauline's eyes were dry. Her knuckles, however, tightened sharply each time someone mentioned Marjorie's name. Mrs. Bloxby approached, offering Agatha a discreet smile. I wondered if you might come to the vicarage for tea, she said softly. There's something you ought to hear. Agatha nudged Charles. Come along. Mrs. Bloxby has a tone. Charles arched a brow. A revelation tone? A trouble tone. They followed her to the cosy vicarage sitting room. The kettle steamed, the furniture smelled faintly of lemon polish, and a plate of shortbread waited as though comfort were a moral obligation. Mrs. Bloxby poured tea delicately. I don't wish to gossip, she began. Agatha snorted. Of course you don't. Do continue. Mrs. Bloxby sighed but smiled. I did overhear raised voices in the Keene household last week. Marjorie was speaking rather sharply about a new will. Agatha straightened. A new will? Yes. She apparently threatened to cut Leonard and Pauline out, something to do with a charity she supported. Mrs. Bloxby passed Charles the sugar. Pauline was very distressed. Distressed? Agatha repeated. She looks about as distressed as a lamp-post. Mrs. Bloxby hesitated. Sometimes quiet people hide stronger feelings. Agatha felt a spark of excitement. Did Marjorie actually change the will? I don't know, Mrs. Bloxby said, but there was certainly a quarrel. Charles set down his cup. Financial motive. Classic. Agatha rose abruptly. Come on, I want another look at Pauline. Back outside, the churchyard buzzed with post-service milling. Pauline knelt among the border plants, trimming deadheads from a cluster of foxgloves. The tall purple bells swayed gently as she worked. Hello, Pauline, Agatha said, approaching with feigned warmth. Pauline glanced up politely. Mrs. Raisin, Mr. Fraith. Lovely service, wasn't it? It was adequate, Agatha said. You're very knowledgeable about plants. Oh, I adore gardening, Pauline said, brightening for the first time. Especially foxgloves. They're so elegant. Agatha exchanged a sharp look with Charles. Digitalis again. Marjorie kept a lovely garden, Pauline continued. I moved a few seedlings from the lane to brighten things. She trimmed another blossom with the firm precision of a surgeon. Agatha's pulse quickened. You moved foxgloves to Marjorie's garden? Oh yes, Pauline said lightly. She barely noticed. And of course Belinda's garden has much healthier soil. Her voice faltered slightly as she realized what she'd admitted. So, you've been in Belinda's beds? Agatha asked. Pauline flushed. Only briefly. She's very welcoming. Is she? Agatha murmured. Pauline stood, dusting off her skirt. Well, I must help Leonard speak with the estate agent. Agatha's eyebrows shot up. Estate agent? Oh yes, Pauline said. There are options for the property. From across the graveyard, an Evesham estate agent, suited, shiny and sweating, was speaking intensely to Leonard, who looked overwhelmed. Agatha felt the red herring try to hook itself into her thinking and shoved it aside. The agent had profit in his eyes, not poison. Pauline moved to leave, but something caught Agatha's attention. A flash of cream-coloured paper on a nearby bench. Pauline paused, reached down, and slid the tiny scrap into her pocket with quick, quiet efficiency, so fast someone inattentive would never have seen. But Agatha saw. Charles, too. Agatha stepped forward. What was that? Pauline smiled serenely. Oh, just rubbish. I'm tidying. Agatha's heartbeat thudded once, sharply. That paper, cream-coloured, the corner embossed faintly. It looked exactly like the stationery of the anonymous kindness notes Belinda supposedly wrote. Pauline's hands, calm now, rested at her sides, but her eyes were calculating, alert. Invisible people, Agatha thought, make excellent eavesdroppers and excellent plotters. Pauline excused herself and glided away, merging into the crowd like smoke. Charles murmured, She's not as dull as she pretends. No, Agatha murmured. She isn't dull at all. They walked through the churchyard, Agatha turning everything over in her mind. Pauline's knowledge of foxgloves, her presence in both gardens, her financial motive, and now the scrap of notepaper slipping into her pocket like a secret. Belinda, by contrast, had the blundering panic of someone used to being blamed. Pauline had the neat calm of someone who expected to get away with things. As they reached the gate, Charles nudged her. You realize, of course, that if Pauline has been writing those notes, it reframes everything. It reframes her, Agatha said. Which is more interesting? Dangerous, Charles corrected. But interesting, yes. They returned to Agatha's cottage. Hodge greeted her with a superior stretch, tail flicking like a flag of disdain toward all church-related activity. Agatha scooped him up, pressing her nose into his fur. I found something, darling. Hodge blinked at her with slow, unimpressed gravity. Charles shrugged off his coat and leaned against the table. So, what now? We wait, Agatha said, and we watch Pauline. She's good at watching too. Yes, Agatha murmured, but not as good as me. Charles smiled. Your vanity is showing. I'll hang it in the window if I like. They settled into the cottage, tension humming lightly beneath the domestic quiet. Agatha scratched Hodge's chin, feeling the purr vibrate through her fingertips. The kettle clicked off with a soft sigh. Agatha glanced toward the churchyard in the distance, recalling Pauline's calm smile as she pocketed that slip of paper. People who fade into wallpaper, she murmured, can hide entire murders behind them. Hodge yawned, unimpressed but warm against her lap. Agatha poured tea, the steam curling like a promise of revelations yet to come. Agatha had just settled into her armchair with the smug satisfaction of a woman who intended to ignore the world for the rest of the evening when a frantic knock shattered the peace. "Oh, for heaven's sake," she muttered, slamming down her magazine. She yanked open the door. Belinda Pym stood on the step, shaking, her hair in disarray, eyes glossy with tears. In her hand she clutched a crumpled note. "Mrs. Raisin," she whispered, "something dreadful has happened." Agatha crossed her arms. "Unless your cottage is on fire, it can wait until morning." Belinda burst into full sobs. "Someone's destroyed my garden." That, annoyingly, was enough to jolt Agatha's attention. She grabbed her dressing gown and marched outside. The night sky above Castley was shockingly clear, sprinkled with stars. Ordinarily, Agatha would have admired it. Tonight she was too busy stepping around churned soil. Belinda's foxglove bed had been trampled to ruin. Stems snapped, blossoms crushed, earth clawed into messy piles. Footprints marked the path like accusations. "What on earth?" Agatha began. Belinda thrust the note toward her. "This was shoved through my letterbox." Agatha unfolded it. The message, scrawled in furious looping handwriting, read, "Kindness can kill. Stay away." She stiffened. The cream paper, faintly textured, looked horribly familiar. It matched the stationery used for Marjorie's parcels. Same stock, same faint embossing. The handwriting, though shaken, had that same florid style. Hodge padded out onto the path, sniffed a ruined foxglove, then hopped into Belinda's lap, without hesitation. "Oh, traitor," Agatha muttered. "You like everyone who doesn't feed you on time." Belinda stroked him with trembling hands. "Why would someone do this? I've tried so hard to be kind." "Yes, well," Agatha said, softening despite herself, "villages can be allergic to goodwill." Lights flickered on across the lane. Curtains twitched. Within minutes, Castley residents emerged in clumps, buzzing like bees around catastrophe. Doris Simpson hurried over in her nightcoat. "Oh, you poor lamb. Look at your lovely foxgloves." A knot of women from the WI gathered nearby, whispering with undisguised relish. "I'm telling you," hissed Mrs. Lacey, "she did it herself, playing the victim." "Nonsense," said Mrs. Cartwright. "Someone wants her gone. Or someone's covering their tracks," another offered. Agatha rolled her eyes. "Idiots, the lot of them." Bill Wong arrived shortly after, looking exhausted but composed. He crouched to examine the note. "It's the same paper we found at Marjorie's," he murmured. "Yes," Agatha said, "but the script's angrier, jagged." "Meaning?" "Meaning someone's losing their patience." Bill pocketed the note. "I'll take this as evidence, and get a statement in the morning." Belinda's shoulders sagged. "I didn't do anything wrong." Agatha hesitated, then squeezed her arm awkwardly. "Not everyone likes enthusiasm." The villagers drifted away eventually, muttering theories. Belinda returned home with trembling gratitude, Hodge following her halfway before Agatha snatched him up. "No fraternizing with suspected poisoners," she scolded. Hodge yawned. The next morning, Agatha pushed open the WI hall door with the resigned dread of a woman expecting idiocy. She wasn't disappointed. Doris Simpson fluttered around Belinda like a frantic hen, offering tissues, tea, and biscuits. "You've been through so much, dear," Doris said. "We're all behind you." Across the hall, a cluster of WI women whispered nastily. "She always needs attention," one muttered. "Pathetic," another added. "Destroying your own garden. Imagine the desperation." Belinda pretended not to hear, folding leaflets with tearful dignity. Pauline sat at a separate table, quietly collating jumble sale forms. Her expression was neutral, polite, hard to read. She didn't speak, but her ears were pricked for gossip. Roy Silver burst into the hall in a swirl of cologne. "Darlings, I've just heard the scandal, vandalism in the night. Why does everything exciting happen when I'm not here?" Agatha ignored him. Something else had caught her eye. A stack of cream-coloured paper on the WI photocopier. The exact paper used for the threatening note. Roy leaned into her shoulder. "So, the paper isn't rare. Anyone here could take it." "I know," Agatha muttered, "and anyone with cupboard access or anyone borrowing sheets could take it." Roy scanned the room with theatrical suspicion. "Which includes—" "Doris," Agatha said, "Pauline, Mrs. Lacey, Mrs. Cartwright, and Belinda, technically, but she's hardly likely to threaten herself with stationery she openly uses." Roy grinned. You underestimate the dramatic potential of bored women. Agatha ignored that. She watched Pauline instead. The quiet woman folded leaflets with precise, unnerving calm. Her eyes never lifted, not even when Belinda coughed theatrically. Doris fluttered over. "Agatha, dear, I hope you're not upset I borrowed some of the WI paper. I always mean to bring it back, but I'm terribly forgetful." "Borrowed?" Agatha repeated. "Oh yes," Doris said. "Sometimes for shopping lists or reminders. A few sheets go missing now and again. Nothing serious." Agatha nodded, but internally dismissed the idea. Doris couldn't frighten a daffodil, let alone write threatening notes in jagged fury. The meeting dissolved into mild chaos, people discussing everything but the actual agenda. Agatha watched, absorbing all the small tells, Belinda flinching at raised voices, Pauline disappearing into the kitchen for suspiciously long stretches, Doris wringing her hands over a tea towel. Suddenly Charles appeared at Agatha's side, hands in pockets. "How's the coven?" "Idiotic," Agatha said, "but enlightening." His eyes slid to Pauline. "She's very composed." "That's what bothers me." Charles stepped closer. "You think she wrote the note?" "I think she wrote something," Agatha murmured. That night, Agatha lay in bed, restless. Hodge curled at her feet like a warm, furry anchor, but her mind wouldn't settle. The note, the foxgloves, the paper scrap Pauline pocketed, the inheritance dispute, the gardener's knowledge of poisonous plants. If Pauline wanted Belinda blamed, what better way than to use her handwriting style? And what easier paper source than the WI cupboard Pauline regularly accessed for church rotas? Agatha turned over. Hodge grumbled. Then she heard it. A faint, rhythmic sound. Scrape, pause, scrape. Agatha sat up. The noise drifted through the thin wall separating her cottage from the Keen garden. Scraping, digging, at nearly midnight. She crept to the window, careful not to disturb Hodge. The Keen garden lay mostly in shadow, but she could just make out a figure near the border, bent, deliberate, shifting earth in slow, careful movements. She squinted hard. The figure straightened slightly. Pauline, digging something up, or burying something else. Agatha's pulse thudded. Someone, she realized, was helping the helper, but not in the way Belinda hoped, and not in a way Marjorie Keen would have appreciated. She backed away from the window. Hodge stretched, blinking at her with faint superior amusement. "Well," Agatha whispered, "this village grows more suspicious by the hour." She climbed back into bed. Hodge curled beside her, warm and steady. Outside, the digging stopped, but the mystery only deepened. Agatha began the morning with a sharp observation instead of breakfast. Her cottage felt intolerably quiet. Charles had gone home, Roy had flounced back to London, and she was once again left with her thoughts, and the relentless niceness leaking from next door like scented detergent. Hodge sprawled across her radio, warming himself luxuriously on the wireless schedule she had been attempting to read. "Get off," she told him. Hodge blinked without interest. "Fine. I'll go hungry and uninformed." A knock rescued her from arguing with the cat. She opened the door to find Bill Wong on her step, holding a folder thick with seriousness. "I need to talk," he said. "And before you ask, yes, it's about the case." "Well, naturally," Agatha said, ushering him in. "I've barely slept. The entire village is turning into a morbid puzzle." Bill shot her a look. "You love morbid puzzles." "Not when they involve foxgloves, forged kindness, and my own neighbour watching me through curtains." He sighed, taking a seat at her kitchen table. "Forensic results came in late last night. We finally know how the poison was applied." Agatha leaned forward. "Go on." "The digitalis wasn't mixed into the chutney or spread through the dish. It was concentrated, painted, almost, onto the sugared walnuts decorating the cheese savoury." Agatha sat back, mind leaping ahead. "So the killer needed access to the dish after Belinda delivered it?" "Yes," Bill said, "which means someone handled it shortly before the coffee morning." "Belinda brought it early," Agatha mused, "and Marjorie's kitchen was cramped. People were underfoot, fussing, rearranging." Bill nodded. "Multiple witnesses saw Pauline doing exactly that, shifting plates, straightening cutlery, trying to be helpful." Agatha's pulse flicked. Pauline, the invisible relative, the human beige cardigan. "Pauline popped back to her room during the party," Agatha said slowly, Said she needed tablets. She could have returned through the kitchen door. Bill crossed his arms. We're looking into that. Agatha rose abruptly. Come on. Where? For a walk. I need Mrs. Bloxby's memory. They met Mrs. Bloxby on the lane toward the fields, her bicycle basket filled with parish newsletters. She greeted them warmly. Out investigating? She asked gently. Always, Agatha said. What do you remember about the coffee morning, particularly movements? Mrs. Bloxby considered. Pauline did leave for a while. She returned quietly through the scullery door. She carried a small tin and said it held extra biscuits. Agatha exchanged a sharp look with Bill. A tin could hold anything. Mrs. Bloxby hesitated. Pauline is devoted to routines. That morning she seemed flustered, unusual for her. They continued walking across the breezy field path, the light wind brushing Agatha's hair. The air felt open and clear, an ironic contrast to the tightening web in her thoughts. Bill, Agatha said, Pauline made a comment yesterday about those silly sugared walnuts on Belinda's dish. Bill paused mid-step. How would she know the walnuts were important? Exactly, Agatha said. You never told her which part was poisoned. Mrs. Bloxby looked troubled. Pauline said she overheard Bill at the scene. I never mentioned walnuts within earshot of her, Bill insisted. Not once. Then she slipped, Agatha said. Mrs. Bloxby bit her lip. It's dreadful to think, but Pauline did seem strained lately. Marjorie could be very demanding. And threatening to cut them out of the will, Agatha added. You heard the argument yourself. Mrs. Bloxby nodded. Leonard and Pauline depended on that inheritance. Agatha's mind sharpened. A financial motive, access to the food, foxglove knowledge, handwriting resembling the kindness notes. She's checking every box. Bill frowned. We still need more than suspicion. We'll find it, Agatha said firmly. They parted and Bill headed off to interview Leonard again. Agatha walked home, adrenaline buzzing. She found Charles lounging by her gate, looking smug. Miss me? No, Agatha said, but I have news. He followed her inside with the unhurried ease of someone who viewed life as a series of entertainments. As Agatha relayed everything, the walnuts, Pauline's movements, her slip of knowledge, Charles's smile faded into thoughtful interest. Pauline is cleverer than she looks, he mused, which is always dangerous. That's what I keep saying. But clever enough to trample Belinda's garden? He asked. Yes, Agatha said, especially if she wanted to make it appear like Belinda staged drama. Charles tapped her notebook. And the threatening note? She has WI access, and the paper scrap she pocketed in the churchyard was identical. Charles raised a brow. You're sure she pocketed it? I watched her. She's too smooth. Charles grinned. You admire her cunning, really? I do not, Agatha snapped. I admire efficiency, and murder is not efficient. Not unless one gets the inheritance without fuss. Agatha blinked. You're impossible. She shooed him out of her kitchen before he could make himself at home again. Later that afternoon, Trevor Lucas appeared at her gate, pale and agitated. Mrs. Raisin, you've got to believe me. I never touched the blasted walnuts. Agatha sighed. For the last time, Trevor, I'm not accusing you. But people keep giving me looks. All I did was fix the flickering light. Yes, but you were near the kitchen. I was nowhere near the food. Ask anyone. Trevor puffed heavily. Marjorie yelled at me about my invoice, but I didn't poison her. Agatha waved him off. Relax. You're a red herring at best. A what? Nothing. Go home. Trevor left, muttering that villagers were impossible. Evening descended into the soft domestic quiet Agatha both loved and resented. She made tea, half listened to the wireless, and tried not to let her racing thoughts overtake her. Hodge lay across her lap like a warm, opinionated cushion. What do you think, darling? She murmured. Pauline or Belinda? Hodge flicked his tail. He had no patience for human foolishness. Agatha rose to fetch the post from her mat, and froze. Among the catalogues and bills lay a fresh WI newsletter, newly printed, handwritten neatly in a style she instantly recognized. The capitals, looped, flourished, exactly matched the kindness notes. She unfolded it slowly, typed by Pauline Keene, WI Communications Committee. Agatha felt a thrum of triumph under her ribs. She slipped, Agatha whispered, and she underestimated me. Hodge leapt onto the table, pawing the corner of the newsletter. Agatha stroked his head. "We've got her, darling." The kettle clicked behind her, releasing a soft, contented sigh, almost as if the cottage itself approved of the revelation. Tomorrow, Carsley's invisible relative would become very visible indeed. "Doris, we are not faffing about with bunting," Agatha declared, marching into the WI hall as though she owned every trestle table inside it. "This is a community celebration, not a village fete for toddlers." Doris Simpson blinked at her with the shy eagerness of a spaniel. "But Mrs. Raisin, a bit of bunting makes things cheerful, doesn't it?" "Tea and scandal make things cheerful," Agatha said. "Bunting only distracts from the real purpose." Doris, flattered to be consulted, bustled off to fetch lace cloths. Agatha surveyed the room with sharp satisfaction. Late afternoon light poured through the tall windows, glancing off polished teapots and plates of cakes. A deceptive coziness hung over everything, as though this were merely another WI gathering, rather than a room full of people who might well have poisoned Marjorie Keene. Perfect, Agatha thought. A trap should look harmless. She straightened a plate of lemon slices and tried not to think of Charles's amused face when she'd told him her plan. "An award ceremony, Aggie?" "Really?" he had drawled, sprawled in her armchair with casual insolence. "You do realize you'll be presenting a prize to someone who might have murdered their neighbour?" "Exactly why it works," she'd snapped, though she had enjoyed his teasing more than she let on. Guests trickled in now, some curious, some wary, all pretending not to stare at Belinda Pym. Belinda, pale but tidily put together in a neat cardigan, carried a glass dish covered in foil. "Something sweet," she said brightly. "I do hope it helps, well, everything feel more normal." Agatha forced a smile. "We shall see." Leonard Keene arrived next, stiff as a board, with Pauline hovering behind him like a shadow that had reluctantly grown limbs. Trevor Lucas slouched at the door, hands deep in his pockets, pretending not to listen while hearing everything. Even the estate agent had crept in, sniffing the air as though expecting someone to present him with a set of keys. And Bill Wong stood near the wall, officially off duty, but unmistakably here in full investigative capacity. Agatha caught the brief nod he sent her way, careful, steady support. Once everyone settled, Agatha stepped forward, clearing her throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for attending this important gathering. We are here to recognize community spirit." A thin smile tugged her mouth, in all its forms. A ripple moved through the room. Some people shifted, others studiously examined their teacups. Agatha savoured the tension. "We in Carsley believe in good neighbours," she continued. "Neighbours who help, neighbours who notice, neighbours who share cakes and casseroles, and neighbours who perhaps go a touch too far." A few heads jerked up. "But kindness," she said, letting the word settle heavily, "is not always what it appears." Belinda's hands tightened on her pudding dish. Pauline sat small and motionless, eyes fixed on the tablecloth. Agatha drew a breath. Time to lance one boil before the proper surgery began. "Some of you have whispered that our neighbour, Mrs. Belinda Pym, has a, shall we say, history." Several uncomfortable coughs echoed. A care home scandal, a tragic death, a nickname in the tabloids that lingered far longer than decency required. Belinda flinched as though struck. Agatha pressed on. "I've checked what really happened. Belinda did not harm anyone. In fact, she reported the wrongdoing. The inquiry cleared her. The press merely wanted a villain who smiled too much for their liking." A collective shift swept the room. Belinda blinked rapidly, lips trembling. Roy Silver, had he been present, would have applauded Agatha's flair, but she needed everyone here focused on truth, not easy fiction. "It is time we stop pretending Belinda is the only possible villain," Agatha said, voice sharpening. "The pattern is too tidy, too convenient. And convenience," she added with her driest edge, "makes fools of us." Pauline stared down, smoothing an invisible crease along her skirt. Agatha let the silence stretch, then turned. "Mrs. Pauline Keene." Several people jumped. Pauline's head rose slowly, eyes wide in mouse-like terror. "I believe you have some answers we all need to hear." I don't understand," Pauline whispered. "Oh, but you do," Agatha said quietly. "There was a new will, wasn't there? Marjorie threatened to cut you and Leonard out only a week before she died. Something about giving her money to a charity instead. Leonard's mouth fell open. Pauline? She said nothing to me about— Oh, Leonard, do hush, Pauline snapped before catching herself, colour flooding her cheeks. Agatha moved closer, enjoying Pauline's slip. Mrs. Blocksby overheard quite the row, though of course she would never gossip. Mrs. Blocksby gave a mild wince. You stood to lose everything, Pauline, and you're not the mild, invisible helper you pretend to be. Pauline's fingers clenched around a napkin until it tore. But motive alone isn't enough. Agatha turned to the table of cakes. Let's consider means and opportunity. The digitalis was concentrated on the sugared walnuts topping Belinda's cheese savoury. Only someone who handled the dish shortly before serving could have applied it. And who do we know was in Marjorie's cramped kitchen rearranging plates in the name of being helpful? Murmurs erupted. I was tidying, Pauline cried. Everyone knows I tidy. Oh, indeed you do, Agatha said, including Marjorie's foxglove borders, which you moved seedlings into, supposedly for beauty, and foxgloves, as we all know, produce digitalis. Bill stepped forward slightly, but allowed Agatha to proceed. But the most curious part, she went on, is that you knew the poison was on the walnuts before anyone else. You told Mrs. Blocksby you hated those silly sugared walnuts. Strange phrasing, given Bill never announced which part was poisoned. I overheard, Pauline faltered. Overheard what? Agatha pressed. You weren't at the hall when the details were discussed, and Bill is very careful with information. I might have guessed, Pauline said weakly. You do not guess specific nuts, Mrs. Keene, Agatha said, especially not when you delivered a little tin into Marjorie's kitchen that morning. You claimed it contained biscuits, but the tin could have held anything. Pauline's breath came in short bursts. Leonard stared at her as though seeing her for the first time. And then, Agatha said softly, there are the kindness notes. The room inhaled collectively. Agatha lifted a small folder. Here, side by side, the anonymous notes sent to Marjorie and an old WI newsletter typed by Pauline. Same looping handwriting, same florid Ks, same careful, earnest style. You were the angel of pity, weren't you? Comforting Marjorie while poisoning her with the implication she was a burden. Pauline's face twisted. She sneered at everything I did, she said suddenly, voice breaking. Nothing was ever enough. Not the cleaning, not the errands, not the meals. She mocked me. She mocked Leonard. She said people like us contributed nothing. Gasps circled the hall. I only wanted her to see, Pauline whispered. To appreciate. To realize how much I did. I wasn't going to. Her breath hitched. It was just a little nudge. Fate needed a nudge. Bill stepped forward. Mrs. Keene, I'll need you to come with me. Pauline sagged, drained of fight. As he led her to the door, Leonard followed helplessly, muttering her name. Belinda remained seated, hands folded tightly in her lap. Her usual smile had vanished entirely. She stared at the tablecloth as though trying to read a message written there. Agatha exhaled slowly. The room buzzed with shock, relief, and the immediate thrill of gossip waiting to erupt. Doris's voice croaked. Should we still have tea? Of course we should, Agatha said. Nothing stops the WI. A dry laugh escaped her, surprising even herself. She moved toward the samovar, filling a cup while watching the doorway where Pauline had disappeared. The hall felt quieter now, the light softer, the cakes absurdly innocent on their plates. Later, back home, Agatha closed her cottage door with a weary sigh. Hodge padded in from the kitchen, stretched luxuriously, and gave her a pointed look, as though asking why she insisted on solving murders instead of feeding him more regularly. Honestly, Agatha muttered, bending to scratch his head, you're the only neighbour I can rely on. Hodge flicked his tail in dignified agreement, and the kettle released a gentle sigh as it settled to a boil, restoring for one brief moment the ordinary peace of Castley.